My doctor told me I needed to shower every single day. He said it plainly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like I'd asked something foolish. I was 68 at the time, sitting on that crinkly paper on the examination table, and he was already writing something down before I'd even finished the question. Daily, he said. Cleanliness prevents infection. I'm Walter. I'm 82 years old, and I followed that advice for years. Right up until the morning I nearly broke my hip on a wet tile floor, grabbing at a towel bar that wasn't bolted in well enough, my wet feet sliding out from under me, heart hammering, catching myself on the wall with both palms flat. I stood there a long time after that, breathing hard, looking at the floor. Nobody told me that the thing I was doing to stay healthy was the thing most likely to put me in a hospital bed. I want to go back a little. When Linda was still here, the bathroom had a different feeling to it. She kept lavender soap on the edge of the tub. There was always a clean towel folded on the rack. The mirror never had water spots because she wiped it down every morning, same as everything else she did. Quietly, completely, without needing to be noticed. I didn't think about bathing back then. It was just something you did. You came home from work, you showered, you sat down to dinner, you went to bed. There was no thought in it. The body was a machine that needed maintenance, and you maintained it. That's how I understood most things in those years. Practical, transactional. Keep it running. After she passed, that was 8 years ago now, the bathroom got quieter in a way I didn't expect. I kept up the routine because it was all I had left of structure. Up at 6, coffee, shower. It was the shape of a day when days had stopped having natural shape. But the routine was changing me in ways I didn't notice until they were hard to ignore. The first thing I noticed was my skin, not in a vain way, not standing at the mirror examining myself, just the itching, starting somewhere around the shins, then the arms. A dry, prickling irritation that came on worse at night. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning having scratched the back of my wrist without remembering doing it. I figured it was just aging. I figured most uncomfortable things were just aging now. That's what you do at a certain point. You assign everything to the category of, that's just how it is, and you move on. So I bought more lotion, applied it after every shower, which I was still taking every morning, still hot, still long, the way I always had. Stood under the water until the bathroom filled with steam. Felt like something I deserved after a quiet night. The lotion helped for an hour. Then the itching came back. I went to the doctor, not the same one. This was a different physician, a younger woman with a no-nonsense manner that reminded me a little of my mother. She looked at my arms and legs for about 30 seconds and then said something I've been thinking about ever since. She said, "You're washing off everything your skin is trying to keep." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. I thought she was talking about the lotion. She wasn't. She explained it slowly, because I must have had the look on my face that I get when someone says something that contradicts 40 years of habit. That slightly blank, slightly resistant look. My daughter Rachel calls it my not listening face. She's not entirely wrong. What the doctor told me was this. The skin, by the time you're in your 70s, has changed fundamentally. It doesn't produce oil the way it once did. The sebaceous glands, those small organs responsible for keeping skin moisturized and protected, slow down significantly. The outer layer gets thinner, less elastic, more fragile in ways that don't always announce themselves dramatically. And hot water, she said, strips away whatever oil remains. Not partially, thoroughly, every time. She told me to think of it like this. Every shower, I was removing the thin protective coating that my body was working with diminishing resources to maintain. And then I was spending the rest of the day waiting for my body to rebuild what I'd just taken away, which, at my age, it couldn't fully do before morning, when I'd take it away again. The itching I'd been feeling wasn't just dry skin in the casual sense. It was my skin telling me something had been disrupted. The natural microbiome, The bacteria and oils that form a kind of quiet biological defense system on the surface of the skin was being washed away so regularly that it couldn't re-establish itself. I listened to all of this, nodded, went home. And then I kept showering every morning because I didn't know what else to do with the information. The second thing happened about a year later. I'd started noticing that the shower was taking something out of me. Not just time, energy. I'm not a man who complains about fatigue. That's not something that came naturally to me, and it still doesn't sit comfortably. My father worked 14-hour days in a factory for most of his adult life, and I never once heard him use the word tired as an excuse for anything. So when I started noticing that I felt depleted after showering, genuinely physically depleted, I kept that observation to myself for a long time. But it was real. Standing under hot water raises the heart rate. The steam drops blood pressure. For a younger body, this is minor, temporary. For a body at 75, 76, it's not nothing. I'd finish showering and need to sit on the edge of the bed for several minutes before I could dress. Just sit there, which I never told anyone. Then there was the business of actually getting in and out. I don't have a walk-in shower. I have the same bathroom I've had since I bought this house in my early 30s. Tub, shower head, a mat on the floor that I replaced every couple of years. At some point, I couldn't tell you exactly when, stepping over the edge of that tub became something I had to think about, had to plan. I started doing this thing where I'd grip the wall with one hand before lifting my leg over, then position my foot carefully, then transfer weight. It was a whole procedure. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I once stood there so long thinking about the sequence that I forgot what I was doing. Just stood on one leg gripping the wall, completely blanked out. Ended up backing out and making coffee instead. Came back 10 minutes later and started again. I laughed about it for about 30 seconds. Then it struck me that it wasn't actually funny. The morning I nearly fell was a Tuesday in February. Cold out. I'd let the shower run longer than usual to warm up the bathroom first. The tile floor outside the tub was slick with condensation. I stepped out, one foot down, and the foot went. I caught myself, both hands on the wall, heart going like I'd run 100 yards. I stood there for, 2-3 minutes, just breathing. The water was still running in the tub behind me, steam curling up. I was standing in my own bathroom, soaking wet, heart slamming, and I thought very clearly. If I'd fallen at a different angle, if I'd gone down instead of catching the wall, that would have been a different kind of morning entirely. I turned off the water, sat on the edge of the tub, didn't move for a while. I thought about a statistic someone had mentioned to me once, that falls in the bathroom are one of the most common serious injuries for people my age. Not dramatic falls from ladders, not accidents in traffic, just wet floor, one wrong step, the body going in a direction it can't correct. I thought about my father, who died at 71, having never asked anyone for help with anything. About whether that was something to admire or something else entirely. And I sat on the edge of the tub, still wet, and thought, this is a problem I haven't actually solved. I've been approaching it the same way every day, and every day it's gotten slightly more dangerous. That's not stubbornness. That's something closer to foolishness. And I've worked too long and buried too many people to be foolish about the thing that keeps me here. I called my daughter Karen that evening. Not to alarm her. I kept it brief, didn't mention how close it had actually been. But I asked her if she knew anything about showering routines for people my age. She's practical. She doesn't make a production out of things. She sent me a link to some information put together by a group of geriatric specialists and dermatologists. And I sat at the kitchen table that night and read through it with my reading glasses and a cup of coffee that went cold before I finished. What it said confirmed what the doctor had been trying to tell me 2 years earlier, which I hadn't been ready to hear. Bathing every day, for most older adults, isn't medically necessary. 2 to 3 times a week is generally sufficient for full bathing. On the other days, something simpler. A washcloth, warm water. The areas that need attention: face, hands, underarms, the groin. 5 minutes at the sink, no steam, no slippery surfaces, no cardiovascular strain. The cleanliness isn't in the quantity. That was the thing I kept coming back to. I'd been operating on an assumption I'd absorbed somewhere in childhood, that more washing meant more cleanliness, more health, more dignity somehow. That a man who showered every morning was a man who had his act together. But the skin doesn't care about that calculus. The skin has its own system. And the bathroom doesn't care about my sense of discipline. It just has tile and water and gravity. I changed the routine slowly, not all at once. That's not how I do things. I backed off to every other day first. Then, after a month or two, to 3 times a week with careful spot cleaning in between. I bought a shower chair, one of those plastic ones with the rubber feet. Spent about a week feeling vaguely embarrassed about it, even though the only one in the house is me and the dog next door, who comes over when Thomas forgets to latch the gate. Neither of us is judging me. The first Saturday morning I did just a washcloth instead of a shower. I sat at the kitchen table afterward and waited to feel like I'd done something wrong. It never came. The coffee was hot. The morning was quiet. I felt fine. More than fine, actually. Rested in a way I hadn't been on Saturday mornings in a while. What nobody tells you is how much energy the old routine was spending. Not just the physical energy of standing and balancing and stepping over the tub, but the cortisol of managing the anxiety around it, which I hadn't admitted to myself I was carrying. The held breath every time I stepped onto wet tile. The careful calibration of every movement. Without that, just a morning, a washcloth, warm water, quiet. There was something lighter in the day. The itching stopped within 3 weeks. Not completely, not overnight. But within 3 weeks, I stopped waking up having scratched my wrist without knowing it. The skin on my legs, which had looked and felt almost scaly for 2 years, started to ease. My doctor at the follow-up said the natural oils were beginning to reestablish. The microbiome she'd talked about, that biological system I'd been washing away every morning, was being given enough time to do its job. I still showered, just not every day. And when I did, I used cooler water. Not cold, I'm not trying to suffer, but not the steam-filled scalding that had been my preference since I was 30 years old. Warm, reasonable. In and out faster than I used to, with the shower chair if I felt I needed it. My granddaughter came to visit in the spring, Daniel's youngest, the serious one. She's studying to be a nurse, and I told her what I'd changed. She nodded immediately, said, "Yeah, Grandpa, that's actually what they tell us." As if it were the most obvious thing, as if someone had always known and just hadn't said. I didn't say anything about the 2 years of itching or the morning I nearly fell. Some things don't need elaborating. I've been thinking lately about how much of what I carried through my life was rules that nobody had bothered to examine. Keep it running. Don't show weakness. More is better. Routine is discipline. Some of those held up. Some of them cost me more than I knew at the time. The shower thing is small. I understand it's small, but there's something in it that feels representative. The idea that the thing you're doing faithfully, dutifully, the thing you believe is keeping you healthy, might be the very thing quietly working against you. And that the adjustment isn't weakness, it's just paying attention. There's a kind of pride in not changing. I know it well. I practiced it for most of my adult life. The pride of the man who does the same thing the same way regardless of circumstances, because consistency is dignity, or so I believed. But there's another kind of dignity, quieter, the kind that says, I'm still here, I'm paying attention. I'm willing to look at what's actually happening and adjust accordingly. Not because someone told me to, because I have sense enough after 8 decades to use it. The skin is still here. The bathroom floor is still there. And I still have mornings. That much matters to me more than most things now. still wake up to the coffee and the particular quality of early light through the kitchen window, and whatever birds are making noise outside, and the dog next door occasionally visible through the fence when Thomas lets him out. Ordinary mornings. I don't take them for granted anymore, if I ever did. But I'm more careful now about what ordinary costs. If you've been listening this long, then you know something about sitting with a thought rather than rushing past it. I appreciate that, more than I usually say. If any of this felt familiar, the stubborn routine, the quiet discomfort, the moment you nearly fell and didn't tell anyone, maybe come back next time. I'll be here. Take care of yourself, whatever that means to you.